Hi, Lane. I just watched your presentation, and it was actually really, really, really good. It made me really want to visit the area. Out of all the presentations I've seen so far, I think I like yours the best. It had so much information in it and gave you really a full view of everything. And especially since you've been to the region, you really know what was the most interesting. And I thought there were some interesting similarities between Belize culture and some of the history and culture of the country I was researching of Cuba. Some of the interesting things was that Cuba is also big in sugarcane production as well. During the 1800s, they were one of the largest places that produced sugarcane. And I know that you mentioned that sugarcane production is one of the biggest industries in Belize. And what I didn't know that you mentioned and I learned from you was that rum is made from sugarcane. I didn't know that. And both Cuba and Belize both have a big rum production. Cuba has, I think 80% of the rum sold in the U.S., I believe that's percentage is comes from that region from Cuba. So I thought that was really interesting. I didn't know it was made from sugarcane, and it was also interesting because there's a lot of contrast between the different indigenous people. Like in Cuba, they were so undeveloped with the indigenous people there; they didn't even have a written language. Whereas in contrast, in Belize, you mentioned that these people, the Mayans, they were so advanced. They were studying astronomy and they were practicing all these different scientific methods. So that was kind of interesting to see how different their early civilizations were. And it was also interesting just to hear about the wildlife there, because I think it would be really fun to go snorkeling, like you mentioned. And I heard, I looked up online and some facts, and they said that 400 different species of tropical fish are located off the coast of Belize. And I know you mentioned that shark is something that they eat a lot there on the coast, and that makes sense because I also found out online that Belize is one of the best places if you want to view sharks in the world, if you want to go on like a shark viewing boat. And what else? Something that really surprised me was when you were talking about the politics, and I didn't realize that Belize was still so connected to England. I'm not sure how that works if they're a separate country, if they're recognized as a separate country of Belize, how they're still governed under England, and that the Queen is still the head of their government technically. But that was really interesting because I had no idea about that. Let me think of anything else that stuck out at me. Let me see. Oh, one last thing too. I know you mentioned that a lot of the natural resources and like the barrier reef and I think the blue sinkhole that you mentioned, the government protects that, and that's really interesting. I also found out online that from what I was reading, they said that 2/3 of Belize is covered in rainforest that the government protects. So that's pretty interesting because it directly relates to what you were saying, that the government really wants to make sure that the natural resources stay intact for all the tourists, because obviously that's a big industry there. So overall, I really liked your presentation, and I really want to go to Belize now because it sounds beautiful. So, all right, thanks. Bye-bye.